Welcome once again to the Brownstone, Wolfe's sanctuary of logic, orchids, and murder. Do tell us where in the world you're listening from, and don't hesitate to share your thoughts. If you enjoy these cases, consider liking and subscribing. Now then, shall we begin? Nero Wolfe and the murder at the Brownstone door. The afternoon had the stillness of a room between clock ticks. Manhattan's roar stayed soft, a distant rumble under the windows. The street carried a dry haze from motors and coal. I had the desk, the phone, the notebook, and Wolfe's schedule. Lunch had been faultless at 1. Fritz had retreated to his kitchen as if to a chapel. Wolfe had gone to the plant rooms at 4 as ordained. He would not be disturbed for orchids or anything less than murder. I did not expect murder at our door. The office felt balanced and exact. The yellow chair kept its quiet authority. The red chairs waited like obedient jurors. A knock came. It was not a friendly knock or a casual one. It struck the panel hard and held like a warning. Then there was silence. There was no bell. People who knew our routines used the bell. This man had used his fist. I left the desk and crossed the hall. The corridor was sober with lamplight. The air held faint kitchen steam and the city's smoke. I turned the bolt and drew the door. Fritz did not appear. He never appears for that purpose. The door opened on stone, iron, and the small square of sidewalk. Late light lay like dust on the steps. A man lay across the upper step. He had fallen with one shoulder to the jamb and one shoe down. His hat was missing. His face was turned toward the rail as if listening. There was a mark under his left ear, dark and close. The cloth there had singed a little. You know the smell if you have smelled it once. The wound was not large. Blood ran in one narrow ribbon to the stone. His suit was good, dark, and pressed this morning. His shoes were new and dear. His shirt cuffs were starched and clean. His right hand held a scrap of paper. There was writing, torn across a line. I could read a number and the start of a street. The rest was absent, ripped away with haste. His mouth made no breath at all. I looked for life because that is what you do. I did not move the body. I kept my hands where they belonged, open and idle. The step was cold under the leather of my shoe. The city air brought coal and faint vinegar from carts. A taxicab coughed and faded into murk. I listened and heard nothing. I closed the door enough to keep the sight from the street. Then I went to the phone. Wolfe answered from the plant rooms, his voice thick and precise. Archie? Yes. What is it? A man on the stoop, shot, dead. A pause followed, brief and exact. Call Inspector Kramer. Do not touch him. Keep the door. Right. I will come down when you have done that. He rang off. I called homicide and asked for Kramer. The switchboard swallowed a cough and found him. I said my name and our address, West 35th Street. There was no need to spell it. He knew the place. I told him the essentials and nothing decorative. He said he was on his way. I went back to the door. Fritz stood in the hall, pale, a towel in his hands. Do not come closer, I said. He stopped. Is he? Yes. Fritz lowered the towel. He knocked, I said. He did not ring. Fritz nodded once. It is very bad, he said. It is not in the kitchen, I said. He went back toward his domain, slow and straight. I stood with the step between outside and in. I let my eyes make the notes. The powder burn had caught threads on his lapel. The hole in the skin had a neat dark flower. A close shot, not a far one. There was no wallet in sight. The left shoe toe had a fresh scuff. He had caught it on stone, likely here. His collar showed the faintest trace of shave soap. He had dressed with care. The scrap in his hand had penciled figures. They were firm, without tremor. I did not take the paper. It was his until the law arrived. A woman passed on the far sidewalk, glanced and kept her pace. A boy on a bicycle slowed, then went on. I stood and kept the gap with my body. Wolfe comes downstairs as if stairs should apologize. He came now, not fast, but without delay. He crossed to the office and took the yellow chair. He did not ask for a report, he expected one. I gave it clean from knock to call. He listened with his eyes closed and his lips set. Do we know him, he asked. No. Do not presume to know him by his shoes. Noted. Do not jest, Archie. Keep the door until Kramer arrives. Prevent contamination. Do not impede traffic if it can be avoided. Understood. Fritz? Wolfe raised his voice. Yes, sir. Remain below. There will be police. You will not speak unless addressed. "Yes, sir," Fritz called back. The bell sounded then, sharp and official. Uniforms do not knock, they announce. 2 men in blue came first. I let them see, and then widened the door. They took positions without chatter. One guarded the sidewalk and set a line. The other stood above the step with his notebook. He did not move the hand that held the scrap. A car braked hard, and then the familiar tread came. Kramer does not mince. He uses his weight as if it were a tool. He had a cigar in his teeth, unlit by grace or habit. He took one look at the step and swore without heat. "Good afternoon, Goodwin," he said. "It was, and then it was not," I said. He went down 2 steps, bent and looked. He did not touch. He turned his head and looked up at me. "Inside," he said, "after my men finish the photographs." "Right," I said. "We will be in the office." He grunted to the uniform with the notebook. A flash apparatus arrived and bloomed white. The haze drank the light and gave it back thin. The street began to notice. I kept the door as a hinge between the day and us. The men finished the plates and chalked the stone. They lifted the body with clean precision. They bagged the hand and its paper together. They carried him to the car with their eyes forward. Kramer came up and jerked his head. I stepped back and led him to the office. He refused a chair. He let the unlit cigar sit between his teeth. Wolfe did not stand. He watched Kramer as if considering a plant with pests. "Who is he?" Kramer said. "We do not know," Wolfe said. Kramer looked at me. "Tell it," he said. I told it again, once, without embroidery. He stopped me twice for a time and a distance. He nodded at each answer and wrote a mark. "You touched nothing," he said. "Not a thing," I said. "Good. I will send a man for the steps and the rail. There's soot and there might be a trace." There was a knock, not the bell, I said. Kramer glanced toward the hall. "That is a choice," he said. "It tells me he had his hands full, or he disliked the noise." He chewed and watched Wolfe. Wolfe watched the cigar with faint disapproval. "Do not light it," he said. Kramer snorted. "I remember your rules." They let the weight of the thing settle. I waited and kept my tongue still. Kramer asked about visitors, calls and letters. There had been none beyond routine. He made more marks and looked pleased by none. "Your man in the basement," he said. "Fritz," Wolfe replied. "He will not be disturbed unless needed." Kramer nodded. "He never opens the door anyway," he said. Wolfe closed his eyes for a beat. "The man was coming here," he said. He had a paper in his hand. He used his hand to knock. He did not have time to ring. "Or he didn't want to," Kramer said. "That paper may be nothing." "It will be something," Wolfe said. "You will tell me when you know his name." Kramer stared at him, and then at me. "You will not keep anything back," he said. "Not a feather," I said. "Good," he said. "I'll have men on the door for a bit. No one in or out without my say." "This is my house," Wolfe said. "This is a crime scene," Kramer said. "We will manage both," Wolfe said. Kramer left to talk to his men. The office held its breath again. Wolfe leaned back and let the chair take his weight. He closed his eyes. I watched the lamplight and the exact arrangement. The house had taken a wound at the threshold. From here on, every step would matter. Kramer had not left long before returning from the curb, fury still rolling off his shoulders as if the city itself had refused him peace. He barreled back into the office without ceremony, cigar still clenched between his teeth, and planted himself square before Wolfe's desk. "You'll answer questions now," he snapped. "Who was he? What business brought him here?" Wolfe did not open his eyes at once. He merely flexed his fingers against the chair arms and murmured, "We do not know his name." His purpose was silence before it reached my ear. I poured the beer Wolfe demanded, not because he thirsted, but because Kramer needed the sound of the glass on wood to remind him this was Wolfe's house, Wolfe's rhythm. The inspector pressed harder, circling through the same questions with more heat, but Wolfe batted them away like gnats. Fritz was summoned briefly, confirmed nothing, and dismissed with the weight of Wolfe's hand. Kramer grew red, muttering about corpses on our doorstep and confessions still to come. Wolfe's voice stayed steady. The dead man had meant to speak, the scrap in his hand would prove purpose, and Kramer would learn the name before long. When Kramer finally stormed out to push his men harder, the Brownstone sagged into silence again. Wolfe steepled his fingers, and I made a note in my book. Tomorrow, trace the fragment. The case had entered with blood on our stone, and now it would be carried into every corner of the house until Wolfe had the truth. The uniforms had finished their chalk marks and carried the body away, but the step still bore the memory of weight. I stood there with Kramer's man watching me like a hawk and kept my hands light. When the order came that the personal effects were cleared for my inspection, I bent down, notebook ready, and took inventory with the kind of care Wolfe demanded. CSU had already bagged the rest. I wasn't trespassing on their chain of custody. No wallet in the pockets, no watch on the wrist, no hat anywhere nearby, either stripped or never brought. But his shoes told me plenty. Black calfskin, well-polished, soles barely worn. They whispered money, even if the missing wallet tried to shout robbery. I straightened and looked at Kramer's man. He didn't like me poking around, but couldn't argue. Wolfe had insisted, and Kramer had grumbled assent. The man's coat lining had been torn in a struggle, threads hanging loose. His tie was silk, knotted with precision, too fine for an errand boy. Whoever he was, he hadn't walked far in life without good taste. The torn scrap from his hand had gone into evidence, but I remembered the jagged edge, the penciled number 83, the start of a street. Someone in a hurry had ripped it. Maybe him, maybe his killer. Back inside, the office had a hush, as if the walls themselves disliked disturbance. Wolfe sat immovable in the yellow chair, fingers pressed together, eyes half closed. He listened without comment as I reported, detail by detail. When I finished, he opened his eyes. The man, he said, was a client. He came here with intention. He was prevented. Therefore the case is mine as much as Kramer's. Kramer barked from the corner where he stood chewing his cigar without fire. Your case? Don't flatter yourself. This belongs to homicide. Wolfe's head turned, heavy as an owl's. He sought me, Inspector. His presence here affirms my jurisdiction, though not in your ledger. Kramer growled. Jurisdiction? You sit in that chair while my men drag corpses. That's jurisdiction enough. I intervened before Wolfe's temper tipped. There's also the matter of the paper, half an address. If the other half can be found, it may tell us where he was before he came here. Papers with evidence, Kramer snapped. Archie remembers what it bore, Wolfe said. Archie will trace it. Archie, you will do so tomorrow morning. I nodded. Orders were orders, and Wolfe never contradicted his own commands. Fritz appeared at the door, silent until Wolfe inclined his head. The kitchen awaits dinner, sir. Shall I continue? Yes, Wolfe said. The rhythm of this house must not falter. Fritz withdrew. Kramer snorted. A man gets shot on your stoop and you worry about your meals. Meals, Wolfe replied, sustain life. Death is the interruption. You, Inspector, must resolve interruption. I must preserve order. I watched the two of them, Kramer restless, Wolfe fixed. Between them stood the fact of the dead man's shoes, his missing hat, and the scrap of paper that would not let me go. I made a note in my book. Find the origin of the stationery. If Wolfe said the man was a client, then he was, and my task was clear. The Brownstone had become a crime scene, but it was also still our fortress. What had happened at the door had tied us to a stranger's fate, and there would be no peace until we knew his name and why his last step had been toward us. The office smelled of polish, beer, and the faint trace of orchid loam drifting down from upstairs. Wolfe sat in the yellow chair, vast and immovable, fingers steepled under his chin. I had arranged the red chairs in a neat row opposite him. Kramer had gone off to hammer his men into order, but he had left us clearance to conduct interviews. Wolfe insisted the process begin here, in the Brownstone, under his eye. My job was to fetch them in turn and see how they wore their nerves. The first to enter was Mrs. Helen Vardis. Widow now, though her bearing carried no weight of grief. She was tall, draped in black crepe that looked too carefully chosen, and her gloves were pearl grey. Her gaze swept the room once, settling neither on Wolfe nor me, but on the rug between them. She lowered herself into the chair as if it had been designed for her, spine rigid, chin lifted. Wolfe studied her in silence, eyes half closed, letting the quiet stretch until it ached. At last he said, "Madam, you were his wife." Her tone was even, almost rehearsed. I was. We were not close in recent years. He pursued business. I kept to my own circles. What circles? I asked. Clubs, charities, dinners. She flicked her gloved fingers. Nothing extraordinary. You heard of his death from the police? Wolfe asked. Yes. She folded her hands. Inspector Kramer arrived at my apartment. He was less than gentle. Your husband carried no wallet, Wolfe said. Was it habit to go without? Her eyes narrowed. No, he never left home without it. That landed like a weight. A robbery, perhaps, but Wolfe's lids stayed heavy, unreadable. I asked, Did he mention coming to see Wolfe today? No, she said. Her gaze darted toward me, then dropped. He was secretive, always. Wolfe leaned forward a fraction, which in Wolfe language meant thunder approaching. You appear composed. I am practical, Mr. Wolfe. Death does not alter that. Wolfe made a small grunt, closed his eyes again and waved his hand. Enough. Archie, the next. I escorted her out. In the hall she did not meet my eye. The click of her heels was precise, without tremor. Charles Lantry entered as if the place belonged to him. Sleek suit, silver tie-pin, hair slicked, shoes that whispered expense. He offered a smile too wide and stood until Wolfe gestured. He sat with a flourish, crossing his legs, exposing silk socks. Mr. Lantry, Wolfe said, you were the deceased's business partner. Yes, he replied smoothly. For several years, real estate ventures, profitable ones. Profitable to whom? Wolfe asked. To both of us, Lantry said, but his eyes slid away. I noted the hesitation, the evasive twitch of his mouth. Your partner kept no wallet today. Odd, isn't it? Lantry adjusted his cuff. Perhaps he misplaced it. Or someone relieved him of it, I said. He shrugged. I wouldn't know. You met with him this morning, Wolfe pressed. At the office, Lantry admitted. Routine discussion. On what matter? Contracts, Lantry said. The word hung flat. Wolfe shifted in his chair, a mountain stirred. Contracts often breed disputes. Did you quarrel? Not at all. The smile returned, thin and false. Wolfe's eyes opened fully, dark as basalt. You are too facile, sir. It annoys me. Lantry flushed but held his pose. I marked him down as smooth and slippery with a pocket full of secrets. Wolfe dismissed him with a wave as he had the widow. The last was Evelyn Marsh. She entered with quick steps, carrying a handbag clutched to her ribs. She was young, sharp-eyed behind round spectacles, and her voice trembled when she greeted Wolfe. You were his secretary? Wolfe asked. Yes, sir, for 2 years. You handled his correspondence? All of it. Then you will know his engagements, Wolfe said. She twisted her handbag strap. I kept the calendar, yes. Was he due here today? Her eyes darted to me, then back. He mentioned seeing someone, but he didn't name you. But he wrote an address on paper, I said. Her lips parted. She caught herself. How do you know? Because I saw it, I said. She coloured and looked at the rug. Wolfe leaned forward, voice heavy with weight. Miss Marsh, you reveal knowledge you ought not have. Guard your words. She stammered. I only meant he was troubled. He seemed anxious this morning. He locked his office door. What time? Wolfe asked. Around 11. Her answer was swift, too swift. Wolfe's eyes glimmered, catching it like a fishhook. You state a time not supplied to you by police. You had knowledge in advance. She gasped, realizing the slip, then tightened her lips. I guessed. You did not guess, Wolfe said, tone like iron. You knew. The silence pressed her until her shoulders slumped. She muttered, I heard him telephoning. He said he must go to 35th Street. That was our street. She had known his destination. Wolfe closed his eyes, savouring the confirmation. I wrote it down carefully. She had given more than she wanted, and Wolfe had drawn it without moving from his chair. He dismissed her with a flick of fingers. She left quickly, heels clattering. The office sank into quiet again. Wolfe breathed deep, then spoke. Archie, 3 portraits. A widow with poise too perfect, a partner with answers too smooth, and a secretary with eyes too quick. Each conceals motive. Each touched him before he came here. Each may have driven him to me. I said, all 3 knew something he didn't live to tell. Phooey, Wolfe muttered. One knew too much, one wanted too much, and one endured too much. The rest we shall see. He reached for the glass of beer Fritz had placed earlier, lifted it to the light and drank with slow precision. The case had entered the Brownstone clothed in widow's crepe, partner's silk, and a secretary's nervous eyes. It was ours now, whether Kramer liked it or not. Kramer came back from the curb with a face that promised war, his jaw working around the unlit cigar like a dog on a bone. He entered without asking, which in his case was politeness, and flung a photograph on Wolfe's desk. Wolfe glanced at it once, then let his lids fall as though he had been shown a child's drawing. I picked it up, a revolver, standard .38, lying in the bottom of a dented trash can. The background suggested a side street not far from us, the kind of block where lamps burned dim and fog from the river clung low. Kramer stabbed the cigar at me. Found it 2 blocks away. Ballistics matched the slug. Prints on the grip belonged to Mrs. Helen Vardis. That's your case wrapped. Phooey, Wolfe murmured. Kramer wheeled on him. Don't phooey me. She shot him. Threw the gun. We find the gun. That's it. Wolfe opened his eyes slowly, the way a bear might open them before deciding whether to swat. You are content with too much convenience, Inspector. Convenience is rarely honest. It's evidence, Kramer barked. It reeks of arrangement, Wolfe replied. Your revolver, like a stage prop left for applause. I said, funny how a widow manages to drop her pistol in a public can 2 blocks from here, where any child might have found it, and yet the timing's perfect for your men. Kramer growled. Her prints were on it. Explain that, Goodwin. I won't. Not yet, I said. But it's too neat. Wolfe gestured for silence, then lifted his glass and sipped beer with supreme indifference. Inspector, charge her if you will, but you will find yourself embarrassed. Kramer thrust his hat lower on his brow, turned on his heel and stormed out, leaving the smell of damp wool and fury. When the front door thudded shut, Wolfe opened his eyes fully. Archie. Yes, sir. You will follow Mr. Lantry this evening. Observe without intrusion. Report all. Consider it done. Fritz appeared briefly, carrying the tray from the kitchen. He set down sliced beef with horseradish, a dish fragrant enough to blunt argument. Wolfe inclined his head, and Fritz withdrew without a word. Night spread over Manhattan with its usual economy, lamps throwing weak halos, fog creeping from the river, taxis coughing smoke. I picked up Lantry at his office near Madison. He left late, too late for an honest day's work, coat collar turned up against the chill. I trailed him at distance, keeping shadows for company. He walked briskly, heels sharp on pavement, and turned toward a hotel that kept its blinds half drawn. He slipped inside through a side entrance. I waited, hands in pockets, hat brim low. 10 minutes later he emerged with a man I didn't recognize, short, heavy-set, wearing a coat too large. They spoke in close tones, Lantry gesturing with quick irritation. The stranger nodded, passed him a small envelope, and melted back into the night. I stayed on Lantry. He headed west, glancing over his shoulder once, sharp and nervous. He ducked into another doorway, where a second figure waited, lean and narrow-faced. They exchanged words I couldn't catch. Money changed hands. Bills folded tight, passed quickly. Then Lantry lit a cigarette, though the match flared only long enough to reveal his tense mouth. He ground it out and strode off toward Broadway. I followed until he reached his building. He disappeared inside, shoulders hunched. No more meetings, no more envelopes, not tonight. I filed the details in my head. 2 unknown men, 2 separate exchanges, and Lantry carrying debts of conscience if not of ledger. By the time I returned to the Brownstone, Wolfe had finished dinner and was installed in the office. He listened without interruption while I reported each move, each face, each gesture. When I finished, he closed his eyes, hands folded over his belly. A widow's fingerprints on a revolver in a convenient can, he said slowly, and a partner slinking through shadows with nameless men. Which reeks more, Archie? They both smell, I said, but one's perfume, the other garbage. Wolfe's lips twitched. Precisely. We must separate fragrance from stench. The lamplight glowed on the red leather chairs, waiting for the next suspects to sit. Outside, the city's fog pressed against the windows, but inside, the Brownstone held its stillness. We had a gun too clean, a widow too calm, and a partner too busy in the dark. It was a beginning, but the truth was still hidden, waiting for Wolfe to drag it, protesting, into the light. The office clock ticked toward 4, and Wolfe's ritual began with mechanical certainty. Fritz brought the tray, A glass, heavy and chilled, a bottle of beer, beading with cold, set precisely on the side table. Wolfe extended a hand without opening his eyes. He drew the first swallow with the solemnity of prayer. The orchids upstairs had received their due. Now it was his turn. The knock came soft, respectful, timed against the sip. I opened the door to Saul Pantzer. He slipped in without rustle, cap pulled low, coat plain, eyes calm. Saul never wasted words. He nodded once to Wolfe, then to me, and waited. Wolfe set the glass down, regarded him. "You have it?" Saul unbuttoned his coat, took a small notebook from his pocket, and spoke evenly. I followed the widow, Helen Vardis, as instructed. She was at the Civic Social Club from 8:15 until after midnight. I verified with the staff. She signed the register, and she remained visible in company. She could not have been at your door at the time of death. The words landed like stones. Kramer's neat case had relied on her prints on the revolver. Wolfe breathed through his nose, deep, deliberate. "So," he said, "the convenience deepens." I leaned back in my chair, stretched my legs. "That leaves our tidy revolver looking too tidy. Somebody wanted her hung out." Wolfe lifted his brows, eyes closed again. "Exactly. The killer sought not only to end a life, but to shape suspicion. Such artifice deserves contempt." Saul added, "She was composed when I observed her today. No sign of panic. She carries herself cold, but not guilty cold. More like insulted." "That fits," I said. "She wasn't mourning. She was annoyed." Wolfe murmured, "Annoyance does not hang a man. It only irritates him." He raised his glass and drained another swallow. Saul replaced his notebook, adjusted his cap. "That's the report. I'll wait instructions." Wolfe inclined his head. "Remain available. Archie will need your discretion soon." Saul nodded and slipped out as quietly as he had entered. The door closed behind him without echo. I swung back toward Wolfe. "That leaves us with a partner slinking about with strangers, and a secretary who knows more than she admits. Meanwhile, Kramer's ready to parade the widow before a jury." Wolfe's lips curved in distaste. "Kramer prefers the straightest line, even when it leads into fog. He is a bull, and bulls admire only the obvious." I rose and paced the rug, restless. The office felt too still. Outside, the city stirred with horns and footsteps muffled by fog. I wanted movement, not deduction from a chair. Wolfe's voice cut through. "Archie, your impatience offends me." "Maybe, but it keeps us alive." He half smiled, rare as a solar eclipse. "So you believe." I stopped at the window, looked down at the street lamps flickering in haze. "What do you want me to do?" "Not yet. First consider, why place the revolver so near with her prints unless haste was needed? But the haste is false. The staging is deliberate. That is the mark of calculation, not frenzy." "Which means," I said, "we're up against someone who thinks we'll swallow the obvious." Wolfe nodded once, heavy. "Exactly. And who better to distrust the obvious than us?" He reached for the beer again, fingers curling around the glass with reverence. "Archie, tomorrow you will pursue the fragment. Today you will shadow Lantry again. He met men at night. That is not done for amusement. Press until it yields." "Gladly," I said. "I need fresh air." "Do not be flippant. Air is the least of what you need. Use eyes, ears, and judgment." I grinned. "Always do." He closed his eyes, leaned back, hands resting on the chair arms. The orchids upstairs would have to wait for morning. Tonight belonged to men in shadows. I slipped on my coat, checked the gun in its holster, and thought of Lantry's nervous glance when he had taken money from a stranger. He had secrets, and I meant to pry them loose. The Brownstone stayed still, but I was already moving, Wolfe's orders clear. The widow's alibi had cracked Kramer's case, and Wolfe had smelt the arrangement. That left the city streets for me. The beer was his comfort. The fog outside would be mine. The afternoon ground on after Saul's first report, the air in the office thick with his confirmation that the widow's alibi held firm. I kept my desk busy with notes Wolfe would never read, while Wolfe himself sat in the yellow chair, lids lowered as though he had gone to sleep inside his own mind. The hours slid forward without a word between us, save for the clink of Fritz's tray and the sigh of Wolfe's beer glass being moved an inch this way or that. Outside, the fog was settling, Manhattan dimming under its own breath. Inside, the rhythm was unbroken, stillness feeding thought, and thought sharpening into direction. Wolfe finally spoke near dusk, voice deep as if dragged from earth itself. "Archie, the fragment must be pursued. Tomorrow." That was his style. Let hours pass in silence, then lay down the one order that mattered. I stretched, restless. Meanwhile, Wolfe said, "watch Mr. Lantry again. He carries himself as a man who fears his own shadow. Shadows, Archie, are fertile ground for us." I grinned, glad for an excuse to leave the stillness. "Consider it done." Wolfe closed his eyes once more, satisfied. The brownstone remained steady, but the chase was sliding into the city streets, and it was mine to carry. The evening fog lay thick over Manhattan, lamps burning halos into the murk, cabs edging along with horns muted by woolen air. I had Lantry in sight from the minute he left his office. He carried himself with the quick polish of a man eager to be unseen, collar up, hat brim low, stride clipped. I stayed a block back, keeping to shadows, coat collar turned high, shoes noiseless on pavement. He moved west, past shuttered shops and cafes where smoke curled into the street. At 10th Avenue he cut south, then stopped at a hotel whose neon blinked tired letters through the haze. He checked his watch, looked once behind and went in. I gave him a count of 30, then followed. The lobby was dim, brass fixtures tarnished, carpet threadbare. He had taken the stairs, not the lift. I shadowed upward, quiet as Saul had taught me years back. On the second landing I caught sight of him entering a door halfway down the hall. He did not knock. He turned the key himself. I waited, ears sharp. Inside came the faint scrape of chairs, then a woman's voice. I moved closer, careful to remain unseen. Through the crack of the jamb I glimpsed her, Evelyn Marsh, spectacles glinting in weak light, face drawn, hands tight around a handbag. She leaned toward him, urgent. Their voices carried fragments. "You promised," she said. "I will," he answered low, "but you must wait." She shook her head. "Too long already. They'll discover." He cut her off with a raised hand. "Not if we're careful. Once the account's clear, we'll have it." The rest blurred under the hum of a radiator, but the picture was sharp enough. Lantry and the secretary, joined by something more than dictation. I backed away, silent, and left the hotel. Outside, fog swallowed the lamps, the street reeking of coal smoke. I filed it tight. Evelyn, Lantry, secrecy, urgency. That was motive carved in stone. Later, back at the Brownstone, Wolfe received me as though he had never moved since 4 o'clock. He sat in the yellow chair, serene, a fortress in flesh. Fritz had brought the evening beer and withdrawn. I gave my report clean and spare, while Wolfe's lids lowered until they seemed closed. "Evelyn Marsh," he repeated when I finished, "with Lantry, in a hotel room." "That's right," I said. Voices urgent, talk of promises and accounts. She wasn't typing minutes. His lips pressed into a line. "Pfui, they conspire. Whether by lust, greed, or desperation, they conspire." The bell rang, soft and certain. I answered. Saul Panzer entered, cap in hand, face calm as ever. He nodded to Wolfe and me. "I have it," Saul said. Wolfe gestured for him to speak. "Lantry's finances are ruined," Saul reported. "Debts to private lenders overdue for months. He covered them with new loans, but now the collectors are pressing. If he doesn't pay soon, his holdings collapse. He stands to lose everything." Wolfe opened his eyes. "Ah." "Sources confirm," Saul added. "Not rumour. He's cornered." "Good," Wolfe said. "Not good for him, but good for us. A cornered man with debts, joined to a secretary with knowledge, that is a net woven tight. They feared the victim, and the victim sought me. The confluence is plain." I leaned forward. "So he killed to save his skin?" "Not yet proven," Wolfe said, "but the design begins to show." Saul said no more, only waited. Wolfe gave him a nod of dismissal. Saul left as quietly as he had come, swallowed by the night. The office settled again. Wolfe lifted his glass, drank slowly, and set it down with care. "Archie, consider the pattern. A revolver planted with the widow's prints, a secretary entangled with her employer, a partner drowning in debt. Which fact carries weight?" "The debts," I said. "Precisely. Money breeds desperation. Desperation breeds folly. Folly breeds murder. I tap my pencil. Then Lantry's our man. Perhaps, but we do not leap. We observe, we confirm. The web is not yet complete. I wanted to move, to press, to shake the truth from their throats. Wolfe wanted stillness, orchids, beer, reflection. The lamplight glowed on the rug, the fog pressed against the panes, and the city hummed outside. But here in the office, judgment gathered, slow and inevitable, in the man who never left his chair. I found Miss Evelyn Marsh in a cafe off Lexington, the sort of place where the mirrors were cracked, the tables scarred, and the air heavy with stale smoke. She sat alone in a corner booth, shoulders tight, eyes darting behind the round frames of her spectacles. Her handbag rested on the seat beside her, as if guarding it. When she saw me approach, she straightened quickly, but her fingers continued to twist the strap. "Miss Marsh," I said, sliding into the opposite seat. "Mr. Goodwin." She attempted a smile that never reached her eyes. "I appreciate your time." "You said it was important." "It is." I placed my notebook on the table but left it closed. "You worked closely with Mr. Vardis. His schedule, his meetings, his correspondence. You probably knew his habits better than his wife did." Her chin lifted slightly, pride overcoming nerves. "I managed everything for him. He depended on me." "Did you know where he was going the night he died?" She hesitated. "He said he had business. Confidential." "Did he mention Wolfe?" "No." The answer was too quick. I leaned forward. "But you knew he was coming to 35th Street." She froze. The colour drained from her face. No, I didn't." "Then how?" I asked evenly. "Did you know he left his office at exactly 12:30? The police never released that." Her lips parted, then snapped shut. She stared at me through the lenses, panic behind the glass. "I must have guessed," she whispered. "You didn't guess," I said. "You knew." Her hand shook as she reached for the coffee cup. She set it down untouched. "I heard him," she murmured. "He telephoned someone. He said he was going out then. I didn't want to tell the police. They'd twist it." "Who did he call?" "I don't know. He shut the door after." I let the silence press. The cafe clock ticked and a waiter wiped down the counter with a rag that spread rather than erased the stains. "You understand," I said, "that withholding details in a murder case isn't wise." Her eyes flashed suddenly. "I'm not a criminal. I wanted to protect myself." "From what?" She clamped her lips shut. The strap twisted tighter in her hand. I leaned back, studied her. "You were seen with Lantry at a hotel. That doesn't scream innocence." Her eyes widened, then narrowed to slits. "You spied on me." "I observed," I said, "and I saw a secretary meeting her employer in a place where typewriters don't exist." She flushed scarlet. "It isn't what you think." "Then tell me what it is." She looked away, shoulders heaving. "I can't." That was enough for now. I gathered my notebook, stood. "Think carefully, Miss Marsh. Words slip easier than you think, and once they slip, they don't go back." She said nothing. Her hand still worked the strap as I left. The walk back through the fog felt brisk, the air carrying coal dust and the smell of roasting chestnuts from a vendor's cart. Manhattan wore its evening coat, lamps glowing dim halos. I quickened my pace to the Brownstone. Inside, the office was warm with lamplight. Wolfe sat in his chair, the bulk of him steady, eyes half closed, fingers resting on the chair arms. The room smelled faintly of beef stock from the kitchen. Fritz had already retreated below. "Well?" Wolfe asked without opening his eyes. I gave him the account clean, from cafe to slip, no embroidery. When I repeated her words about 12:30, his eyes opened wide, sharp as a blade. "She knew the time," he said. "Exactly. Police never told her. She must have heard him call." "Or she was told by another," Wolfe murmured. "But the knowledge is damning. She spoke what she should not possess." He shifted in the chair, a rare motion. "This thread is slight, Archie, but it is a thread nonetheless. Pull, and the fabric may yield." "I'm ready to pull," I said. "You are always ready to pull," he replied, lips twitching. "Restraint is harder. We will wait." I dropped into my chair, restless. The fog pressed outside, the city moved, and the case thickened. Wolfe sat silent, eyes closing once more, as though the office itself conspired to hold its breath. The kitchen at the Brownstone was as steady as a metronome, the one place where even the city's racket could not intrude. Fritz had his empire below stairs, a polished kingdom of copper pans, white tile, and spotless counters. I'd come down expecting the usual aroma of stock or bread, but the room carried something else that afternoon, something uneasy. Fritz stood at the stove, spoon in hand, staring at the steam without stirring. For a man who treated soup as solemnly as scripture, that was enough to make me stop at the threshold. "Something wrong with the broth?" I asked. He started, more than Fritz ever started, and turned to me. His face was pale, his dark eyes troubled. "No, the broth is correct. It is I who am not." I pulled a chair from the wall, sat, and folded my hands. "All right, out with it. You've cooked in war and peace for kings and Wolfe. What can rattle you?" He laid the spoon aside carefully, wiped his hands on a cloth, and leaned against the counter. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, in a low tone, "I saw him before." "The victim?" "Yes, weeks ago, across the street. He walked there back and forth, not once, not twice, many evenings, always across, never here. He looked at the brownstone, at the door." I whistled softly. "And you didn't mention it?" Fritz's head bowed. "I thought it nothing. Men walk, they think." Perhaps he admired the house, but it was him, I'm sure. The same build, the same face. That day when you opened the door, I knew I'd seen him before. I leaned forward. "Describe it. Which nights?" "Late afternoon, sometimes evening. When I prepared supper, I looked from the window by the service stair. There he was. He did not come closer. He kept to the opposite pavement, pacing. He wore a dark coat. Sometimes he stopped, took something from his pocket, read it, returned it. Then he walked again." "He never crossed?" "Never. That is why I dismissed it. A man who wants entry, he comes. But this one only watched." I rubbed my jaw. Watching, pacing, studying the door, planning. Fritz nodded, slow and grave. "Yes, planning. And now he is dead at that very door. It is not right." I stood, restless. It means he meant to come to Wolfe, but he hesitated. Maybe he feared what he carried, or maybe he knew it was dangerous. Fritz looked stricken. "I should have told you. Perhaps it mattered." "Don't blame yourself. You're the chef, not the detective, but Wolfe will want it." He picked up the spoon again, though his hand trembled. "I do not like this, Archie. Death belongs outside. The kitchen must stay clean." I clapped his shoulder, firm. "We'll keep it clean, Fritz. That's my job." Leaving him to his pots, I went upstairs. The office was warm, lamplight glowing on shelves, the air thick with Wolfe's presence. He sat as always, vast in the yellow chair, a book resting on his knee. He raised his eyes when I entered. "Well?" "Fritz had something," I said. "Not pleasant. He saw our victim before, weeks ago, across the street, pacing, studying the house. Always across, never crossing. He carried something in his pocket, read it, put it back. Fritz swears it was the same man." Wolfe stiffened, which for him was as good as another man's shout. He closed the book carefully, set it aside, and pressed his fingers together under his chin. "He reconnoitered," Wolfe said. "He measured the approach, the timing, the security. He watched before he ventured." "Looks that way," I agreed. "He meant to see you, but he never worked up the nerve, until the night somebody stopped him." Wolfe closed his eyes, brows knitting. Then he was not casual prey. His death was deliberate, orchestrated. He studied my door as a man studies a threshold he must cross despite dread. And when at last he came, he was silenced before his tongue moved. Which means the case wasn't just dropped on us by chance. He chose us, or you. Wolfe's lids opened. His gaze cut across the office, sharp as glass. Precisely. He meant to deliver something, to entrust me with it. That is why he died before he could speak. I dropped into my chair, leaned back. So why wait weeks? If he had trouble, why not knock sooner? "Because trouble ripens," Wolfe said. "Because fear festers. Because some men hesitate until compulsion outweighs dread. He studied, he delayed, and at last, compelled, he came, and he paid." The silence thickened. Outside, the fog muffled horns, the city distant as a dream. Inside, the office felt like the heart of the puzzle, each detail circling Wolfe's vast intellect. I said, "Fritz blames himself for not telling sooner." Fritz is a cook, Wolfe replied. His duty is cuisine, not surveillance. He did what was natural. He dismissed what seemed trivial. Now it is not trivial. Now it is part of the mosaic. He's rattled, I said. He will recover, Wolfe answered. His stock will not sour. His soup will not burn. He is Swiss. He is iron. I allowed myself a grin. Even iron bends sometimes. Wolfe ignored me. He leaned back, eyes half closed again, voice low. Archie, this alters the complexion. The man's death was not merely convenient to another. It was designed to prevent disclosure, to prevent him from reaching me. Therefore, the question is no longer only who killed, but what knowledge the dead man carried that he meant to entrust to me. That knowledge is the true quarry. I tapped my notebook. We've got a widow too tidy, a partner drowning in debt, and a secretary who slips details. Any of them could have wanted him shut up. But why bring it here? Because, Wolfe said, they feared what he would tell me. I let that sink in. The brownstone's walls seemed to close, the office shrinking to the yellow chair, the red chairs waiting like silent jurors, and Wolfe's eyes half hidden in shadow. Archie, he said at last. Yes, sir. Guard Fritz. He is not accustomed to such intrusion, and do not let Kramer's men harass him. He will speak when asked, but you will keep it measured. You're worried for him? I'm concerned for efficiency, Wolfe said curtly. My household must remain inviolate. Fritz must cook, you must observe, I must think. Disturb the rhythm, and clarity suffers. I smiled. That's as close to affection as Fritz will ever get. Pfui, Wolfe muttered, and closed his eyes again. The clock chimed softly. From below drifted the faint aroma of beef stock, steady once more. Fritz had returned to his empire, uneasy but dutiful, and Wolfe sat, vast and still, piecing the mosaic. By nightfall, Kramer's neat package against the widow had sprung leaks. The labmen reported the prints on the revolver were too old, transferred long before the shot. That left him clutching at Evelyn Marsh's careless slip about the time, twisting it into something damning. He had shifted his net, and by morning he was parading her name for the papers. The morning papers screamed headlines, ink heavy with triumph. Secretary arrested in Brownstone murder. Police declare case closed. Evelyn Marsh's photograph, blurred from a newsroom file, stared back from the front page, eyes wide behind her spectacles. She had been taken in overnight, and Kramer had wasted no time planting her in the press as his solution. To the public, it was finished. To Wolfe, it was blasphemy. He sat in the yellow chair, paper spread across his lap, mouth set like granite. Fritz hovered at the door with a breakfast tray, but retreated when Wolfe did not touch it. I leaned against the desk, coffee in hand, watching the volcano build. Pfui, Wolfe said at last, the word echoing through the room like cannon fire. He crumpled the newspaper and hurled it toward the wastebasket, missing by a yard. Idiocy. Monstrous idiocy. I took a sip of coffee. Kramer thinks her slip proves she knew too much. Kramer thinks like a bludgeon, Wolfe snapped. The girl is foolish, not murderous. She had knowledge, yes. That proves contact, not crime. The man's death was contrived to implicate, not revealed by accident. This is grotesque. The bell rang with abrupt violence. I opened to find Saul Panzer, cap pulled low, coat dusted with city soot. He nodded once and stepped inside, eyes as calm as always. Saul, Wolfe said, heavy with command. What have you? Saul reached into his coat, produced a folded sheet and handed it to me. Records. The revolver. It was retrieved after the killing. I read the lines, neat and certain. Witness statements, street times, a junk man who had passed the bin before midnight and seen it empty. The revolver had not been there then. It had been placed after. I passed it to Wolfe. He scanned, eyes narrowing, lips pressed thin. So, the widow's prints were contrived, the revolver was planted. Therefore the girl's arrest is nonsense. Worse, it is theatre. Saul added, I traced the witness farther. He saw Lantry in the vicinity at that hour. Hat brim low, coat collar high. He dropped something at the curb before vanishing into the hotel entrance. Wolfe shut his eyes, leaning back, fingers steepled under his chin. Archie, listen. The revolver was not merely evidence, it was performance. Someone wished suspicion to fall upon the widow, and failing that, upon the secretary. And who had most to gain from misdirection? The partner, drowning in debt. Lantry, I said. Our man in shadows. He planted the gun after the fact. Just so. Wolfe opened his eyes, dark as basalt. He manipulates appearances. He arranges. He conspires with the secretary, perhaps, but his hand is clear in this masquerade. The bell rang again, sharp and official. This time it was Kramer, storming through before I could protest, cigar clenched between teeth, though mercifully unlit. He glared at Saul, then at Wolfe. "You've read the papers," Kramer barked. "It's done. She confessed enough to hang herself." "Phooey!" Wolfe thundered, rising half an inch from the chair, which in his world was eruption. "You arrest a secretary for babbling what she overheard, and you call that proof?" "She knew the time," Kramer shot back. "She lied, she hedged. That's guilt." "That is ignorance," Wolfe retorted. "Guilt lies elsewhere. The revolver was planted after death. Your case is rot." Kramer's eyes bulged. "Planted? You expect me to swallow that?" Saul spoke calmly. "I verified with a junkman on the route. Bin was empty, later full. Witness places Lantry near the spot." Kramer turned on him. "Panzer, you're meddling where you don't belong." "I was asked," Saul said simply. Wolfe's voice dropped low, each word deliberate. "Inspector, you have arrested the wrong quarry. While you prance for the press, the true culprit weaves freely. The revolver was his trick, and you have danced to it." Kramer tore the cigar from his teeth, crushed it in his fist. "You prove it, Wolfe. Otherwise, keep your blasted phooey to yourself." "Proof will come," Wolfe said. "And when it does, you will apologize to Miss Marsh. Until then, you disgrace yourself." Kramer growled deep in his throat, spun, and left with the sound of boots hammering fury into the hall. The office sank back into silence. Wolfe exhaled slowly, a mountain subsiding. He looked at Saul. "Stay close. Continue on Lantry. Follow every debt, every creditor. He is the fulcrum. He will not evade me." Saul nodded, tugged his cap brim, and slipped out. Wolfe settled deeper in the chair, eyelids closing. "Archie." "Yes, sir." "You see how delicately our enemy arranges his tableaus. A widow's prince, a secretary's slip, each a diversion, each designed to occupy Kramer while truth remains cloaked. It insults me." "Then we'll tear off the cloak," I said. "Not we," Wolfe murmured. "You will pursue, I will think." I grinned. "That's the arrangement, always." The lamplight glowed steady. Outside, the fog thickened over Manhattan, horns dull in the distance. Inside, Wolfe brooded in silence, the fury of falsehood burning behind closed eyes. Evelyn Marsh sat in a cell branded guilty by headlines, yet guilt lay elsewhere, in the shadows where Lantry moved. The revolver was no longer evidence. It was proof of deceit. The afternoon had worn itself into a dull grey, lamps burning early against the fog that pressed on the windows. I had just finished typing a set of notes when the bell rang, a firm, steady signal without panic but carrying weight. I opened the door to Mrs. Helen Vardis. She stood there in black crepe again, gloves immaculate, veil lowered. Her eyes, when I met them, were clear as glass, yet carried a strain that had not been present before. She entered without hesitation, moving with a composure that looked rehearsed, and followed me into the office. Wolfe sat in the yellow chair, broad and motionless, a book resting on the table beside him. Fritz had already retreated after depositing the afternoon beer. The red chair opposite was free, waiting like a witness box. Mrs. Vardis removed her gloves with deliberate precision and sat. "Mr. Wolfe," she began, her voice low and even, "I have come to relieve you of further inquiry. There is no need to continue. I killed my husband." I froze halfway to my desk. Wolfe did not stir. He regarded her through narrowed eyes, lids heavy, as though she had merely misquoted Latin. "You killed him," Wolfe repeated flatly. "Yes." She folded her gloves in her lap. "He was unfaithful. He squandered money. He made my life intolerable. Last night I confronted him. We quarrelled and I shot him. It is finished." Her words fell into the room like stones, but they rang hollow, rehearsed like lines on a stage. Wolfe sniffed once, a sharp dismissal. "Madam," he said, "your tale is nonsense. If you had shot your husband, you would not come to me with confession. You would go to the police or you would remain silent. You come here because you believe me fool enough to protect you. Phooey." She stiffened, chin lifting. You think I lie? I know you lie, Wolfe said. You invent despair, but your eyes are dry. You invent quarrel, but your manner is studied. You invent murder, but you cannot invent fact. The revolver was not fired by you. Her face whitened beneath the veil. You cannot know that. I can, and I do, Wolfe replied. The evidence of timing, the planting of the weapon, the alibi verified, all prove otherwise. You did not kill him. She clutched the gloves tighter, knuckles whitening. Then why would I confess? To protect, Wolfe said softly. Not yourself, someone else. Her lips parted, but no words came. She looked toward me, then away, shoulders rigid. I leaned forward. Protecting Lantry, maybe? Or Miss Marsh? No, she whispered. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Then whom? Who compels your falsehood? She swallowed hard, and for the first time the composure cracked. A tremor passed over her face, gone as swiftly as it came. I'd already done the legwork that morning, while Saul tracked Lantry's finances. A judge's name had cropped up more than once, whispered in clubs and bars where whispers cost $1. An influential man, married, careful, except for one indiscretion with a widow who now sat in Wolfe's office. I said it plainly. Judge Markham. Her head snapped toward me, eyes blazing. You dare? I cut in, calm. He's been seen with you. Not often, but enough. A woman doesn't confide her heart to a secretary, but she can't hide from doormen or porters. He visited you, discreet, but not invisible. She pressed a hand to her throat. The silence stretched until it seemed the lamps themselves dimmed. Wolfe's voice came low, heavy as a gavel. You seek to protect the judge. Why? He would be ruined, she whispered. His position, his family, everything. I could not let his name. Bah, Wolfe said. He did not kill your husband, but you believe his scandal would surface if this case opens fully. So you come to shoulder guilt that is not yours. Tears welled now, real, spilling over the veil. You do not understand. My husband knew. He threatened to expose me, to destroy the judge out of spite. He said he would drag him through the press, through the courts. I could not bear it. And now he is dead, and they will find the connection, and the judge will fall. So I thought, if I confessed— You thought wrongly, Wolfe said coldly. The truth does not vanish because you offer yourself as sacrifice. Lies do not erase fact. Your husband's death was engineered by another hand, and your confession only obstructs justice. She sobbed once, then steadied, hands gripping her gloves like rope. You will tell the police— Wolfe leaned back, eyes half closed. I will tell the police nothing of your false confession, nor will I tell them of your liaison, unless necessity compels. But hear me, if you persist in falsehood, you imperil not the judge but yourself. Leave this house, remain silent. I will not suffer your melodrama further. She rose unsteadily. You are merciless. I am factual, Wolfe said. That is my mercy. She turned, veil trembling, and I escorted her to the door. Her steps faltered in the hall, but she did not fall. She vanished into the fog like a shadow swallowed by the city. Back in the office, Wolfe had already taken up his glass of beer, sipping with deliberate calm. Well, I said, she cracked easy enough once the judge came up. You were right. Confession as camouflage. Of course, Wolfe muttered. Women confess to crimes they did not commit, but only to shield the living, never to bury the dead. I sat at my desk. So where does that leave us? Widows clean of murder but tangled in scandal. Secretary arrested but more fool than killer. Partner drowning in debts and lies. And one dead man who meant to speak to you before someone cut him short. It leaves us, Wolfe said, with the certainty that the widow's falsehood strengthens our deduction. The killer is cunning, arranging diversions. We have seen two already, the revolver and this confession. Both are designed to obscure. Both pointing away from Lantry, I added. Precisely, which suggests the finger should point toward him. Wolfe shut his eyes again. But conjecture is not proof. We must wait, and we must draw. The room fell quiet. Outside, horns moaned in fog, the city restless while Wolfe sat immovable, guarding truth against false confession. By noon the watermark had sung its source, Lantry and Company, as distinct as a fingerprint. The office was prepared like a stage set for judgment. I had arranged the red chairs in a precise row opposite Wolfe's yellow throne, spacing them with care so each suspect would feel both isolated and exposed. The lamps glowed warm but steady, curtains drawn against the fog pressing at the windows. The rug lay square, the table clear save for Wolfe's beer glass and a single envelope. First through the door was Inspector Kramer, shoulders broad, jaw set, the inevitable cigar clamped between his teeth though unlit. He glowered at me, then at the chairs, and muttered something about circuses. He planted himself near the mantel, arms crossed, eyes hard. Mrs. Helen Vardis entered next, draped in black silk, veil lifted but face pale, her poise betraying cracks at the edges. She lowered herself into a chair as though she feared its legs might break under the weight of attention. Charles Lantry followed, smooth as oil, silver tie-pin catching lamplight. His smile flickered at me, at Kramer, at Wolfe, but never held. He crossed his legs, adjusted his cuff, and settled as though the room were his. Last was Evelyn Marsh. She clutched her handbag close, shoulders hunched, eyes flickering nervously from chair to rug to Wolfe's face, avoiding everyone else. She sat quickly, almost sinking into the red leather. Wolfe shifted in his chair, vast bulk commanding the room. He inclined his head toward me. I closed the door and resumed my post at the desk. The air thickened, silent but alive with the press of nerves. "Ladies and gentlemen," Wolfe began, voice deep, deliberate, "we are gathered not at my preference but at necessity. A man died upon my threshold. He carried with him a fragment of paper, torn but legible enough to reveal purpose. That fragment has been traced." He gestured, and I opened the envelope, drew out the paper, and placed it on the desk before him. "This," Wolfe continued, "was no ordinary scrap. It bore numbers and the start of a street. Our inquiry has shown the paper belonged to Mr. Lantry's office. The stationery is distinctive. Weight, texture, watermark, all confirm its origin. The dead man carried evidence against his own partner. He sought me to expose fraud." Lantry's smile wavered. He shifted in his seat, hands tightening briefly on his knee. "Fraud," Wolfe said, "orchestrated by you, Mr. Lantry. Investments contrived, funds siphoned, debts concealed. Your partner discovered, and he meant to tell me. He did not live to speak." "That's ridiculous," Lantry said quickly. "Business matters are complicated. Papers circulate. Anyone could—" "Phooey," Wolfe snapped. "The fragment proves his intent. He carried it for my inspection. It was torn from your desk." Kramer growled from the mantel. "If that's true, why didn't he go to the police?" "Because," Wolfe said, "the police would bludgeon, but I would deduce. He trusted my mind more than your truncheons, Inspector. That is why he came here." Mrs. Vardis drew a breath, gloved hands clasped tightly. "Then you say Charles killed him? Is that it?" "Not yet," Wolfe replied, "but I say he contrived to silence him. Whether by his own hand or through conspiracy remains to be seen, yet the chain leads back to him." Evelyn Marsh gasped softly. Her handbag trembled in her grip. Wolfe's eyes, dark and heavy, turned on her. "You, Miss Marsh, know more than you admit. You betrayed knowledge of the time of his departure. You meet Lantry in hotels. You are complicit at minimum, witness at worst." Her voice faltered. I was only following instructions." "Whose?" Wolfe demanded. She looked at Lantry, then away, lips pressed tight. Lantry barked a laugh, brittle. "This is absurd. You drag my secretary into this to smear me. She's loyal, that's all." "Too loyal," Wolfe said. "Loyalty born of fear, not devotion." Mrs. Vardis rose half from her chair. "So my husband was right. Charles was bleeding him dry." Lantry leapt up. "Sit down, Helen. You don't know what you're saying." "Silence," Wolfe thundered, raising one hand. The word froze the room. Mrs. Vardis sank back, Lantry stiff as a man about to bolt. Wolfe leaned forward. "The fragment was his cry for help. He meant to entrust me with the proof of your schemes, Mr. Lantry. Instead, he died at my door. Each of you here had reason, but only one had the stationer's paper and the debts pressing like wolves at the gate." Lantry's face glistened. His handkerchief appeared, dabbing at his brow. Kramer barked. "Are you saying he murdered his partner? Give it to me straight." "I say," Wolfe replied, "that the evidence of fraud is his. The evidence of murder soon will follow, but I will not deliver it piecemeal. For now you have heard the thread. Consider how tightly it winds." Silence reigned. Evelyn Marsh trembled. Mrs. Vardis clenched her gloves. Lantry dabbed at sweat. Kramer chewed fury behind clenched teeth. Wolfe leaned back, closed his eyes, and folded his hands across his middle. "Archie, show them out. Tomorrow we resume." I opened the door. One by one they filed past me, each carrying their own dread. The office emptied, leaving only Wolfe, vast and immovable, and Kramer glowering by the mantel. "Damn you, Wolfe," Kramer said. "If you've got proof, spit it out. Don't play court." "Patience, Inspector," Wolfe murmured. "The web is nearly complete. Tonight it tightens." Kramer swore under his breath and stomped out. The door closed. The office exhaled. Wolfe opened his eyes, reached for his beer, and drank slowly. His gaze fixed on nothing, heavy with thought. The fragment lay on the desk, mute but damning. The conclave had ended, but the reckoning was only beginning. The office was arranged once more as a chamber of judgment. The red chairs faced Wolfe's yellow throne, the lamps bright against the fog outside. Curtains drawn to seal the brownstone from Manhattan's restless night. Fritz had provided the setting with his usual precision. Glasses set aside, rug straight, no detail unkempt. Wolfe sat vast in the chair, eyes closed, lips compressed as though gathering the weight of words before release. Kramer had planted himself by the mantel, broad and irritable, cigar gripped but unlit, jaw working. He hated these conclaves, yet never missed them. Beside him, Mrs. Vardis sat stiff, veil lifted but eyes wary. Evelyn Marsh perched low in her chair, handbag clutched against her, shoulders hunched. Charles Lantry lounged outwardly calm, but the sweat already glistened near his temples. Wolfe opened his eyes and raised a hand. Silence spread, thick and certain. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I have endured falsehood, misdirection, and insult. Now you will endure fact. A man came to me seeking aid. He never spoke because one of you silenced him before he crossed my threshold. Tonight we will correct the balance." He inclined his head toward me. I placed the torn scrap of stationery on the desk before him. Wolfe rested a hand on the fragment already lying on the desk, as though it were no longer in question but part of the furniture. "We have traced its source. You will know where it came from. We need not rehearse it. What matters now is what followed." His gaze turned sharp. "The morning after the murder, Mr. Lantry, you extinguished debts of more than $50,000. The ink was barely dry. Funds were routed through lenders who had pressed you for months. Such sudden solvency does not come from inspiration. It comes from desperation and blood." He held up Saul's report, pages trembling only with the inspector's fury building across the room. "And you were seen that night near the trash can, where the revolver appeared later. Witnesses place you. You thought to cast suspicion on the widow, then the secretary, but your own shadow betrayed you." Lantry forced a laugh. "A scrap of paper? That's all?" "No," Wolfe said coldly. "Not all. We proceed to dismantle the tale you wove." His eyes shifted to Evelyn. "Miss Marsh, you admitted knowledge of the victim's departure time, though police never disclosed it. You overheard him telephone. Whom did he call?" Her voice cracked. "Mr. Lantry. He told him he was going to 35th Street. A collective intake of breath stirred the air. Lantry sprang upright. "She lies!" "Sit!" Wolfe commanded, voice a whip. Lantry froze, glaring. "Miss Marsh," Wolfe continued, "you acted as conduit. You passed instructions, arranged meetings, carried envelopes, but you did not kill. Your error was your tongue." Evelyn lowered her head, trembling. Wolfe turned to Mrs. Vardis. "You, madam, attempted false confession. You sought to shield scandal, but you did not fire a weapon. The revolver, as proven, was planted after death. That leaves only one among you with motive, means, and necessity." He swung his gaze on Lantry, dark and immovable. "You," Lantry sneered. "Convenient for you, Wolfe. You never liked me." "Pfui," Wolfe said. "Convenience is not proof. Proof is Saul Panzer's report. Archie." I withdrew a folded sheet and handed it to Wolfe. He read, voice even, inexorable. "On the morning following the murder, Charles Lantry paid debts exceeding $50,000, funds traced through discreet lenders, extinguished in a single transaction. Where, sir, did this sudden solvency arise? Lantry's face drained colour. That's business. Private business. Business of fraud, Wolfe cut him off. You siphoned funds, your partner discovered. He sought me. You feared exposure, so you used Evelyn to lure him toward my house. You struck him before he reached my door, shot close, silenced him, then contrived appearance of robbery by removing his wallet and planting a revolver with the widow's prints. You meant the police to seize the widow, then the secretary. But you miscalculated. You left a seam. Lantry's voice broke, high and angry. That's slander. You can't prove— Saul observed you that night, Wolfe thundered, near the trash can where the revolver appeared later. Witnesses placed you. You thought yourself clever, but you were watched, and you cannot deny your debts were paid the morning after. Kramer moved forward, eyes blazing. You have him, Wolfe. I have him, Wolfe said. Take him. Kramer lunged. Two plainclothesmen stepped from the hall where they had waited, and Lantry was seized. He struggled once, weakly, then sagged, sweat pouring, face ashen. Mrs. Vardis gasped, hand to her mouth. Evelyn Marsh sobbed into her handbag. Kramer snapped cuffs on Lantry's wrists with relish. You smooth bastard, he muttered. You thought you could play us. Lantry's voice cracked. She helped me. She— Enough, Kramer barked. Save it for the station. They hauled him up, dragging him toward the door. His eyes darted desperately around the office, seeking sympathy, finding none. The door slammed behind them. The silence after was profound. Wolfe leaned back, closed his eyes, and exhaled through his nose. He reached for the glass of beer Fritz had placed earlier, lifted it with care, and drank. Mrs. Vardis rose slowly, composed but pale. So it is finished. No, Wolfe said. It is concluded. There is difference. Evelyn Marsh looked up, face blotched with tears. What will happen to me? You will answer for perjury if Kramer insists, Wolfe said. But your guilt is of foolishness, not murder. Kramer returned briefly, hat low. He's on his way downtown. Wolfe, damn you, you've done it again. Wolfe closed his eyes. Naturally. Kramer grunted, turned, and was gone. The office breathed again. The red chair stood empty. The fragment of paper lay flat, the truth at last spoken. Wolfe settled deeper into the yellow chair, lips easing. Archie, he murmured. Yes, sir. Dispose of that newspaper. Tomorrow it will carry another headline. I grinned. About time. The lamps glowed, the fog pressed at the windows, but the brownstone held its calm. The murderer was revealed, the balance restored. Wolfe raised his glass again, as solemn as any judge, and drank to closure. The brownstone at 8 o'clock was a world apart from the city outside. Fog pressed against the panes, horns moaned from the avenue, but inside the dining room the air was warm with lamplight and the perfume of trout simmered in sauce. Fritz moved with quiet precision, his white jacket gleaming as he placed each dish with the care of a surgeon and the pride of a sovereign. Wolfe sat at the head of the table, immense and still, napkin tucked with a formality that had endured unchanged since his first day in New York. His eyes, half closed with pleasure, flicked to the platter before him, where 2 trout, glistening under a pale cream sauce, kissed with white wine, waited like trophies of victory. I took my seat at his right, easing into the chair with less ceremony. The long day behind us had wrung out tension, but the smell of good food had a way of restoring circulation. Fritz poured the sauce, delicate with herbs, over my plate, then retreated toward the sideboard to oversee service. Inspector Kramer remained the anomaly. He had been persuaded or bullied into joining dinner, though his bulk in the red chair at Wolfe's left suggested a man enduring penance rather than savouring cuisine. His hat had been stripped from him at the door, his coat hung by me, and now he sat glowering at the fish as if it were an adversary. Wolfe raised his fork with deliberate ceremony. He tasted the trout, closed his eyes, and chewed. A long moment passed. Then he swallowed and inclined his head. Excellent, Fritz. From the sideboard, Fritz bowed slightly. Thank you, sir. I dug in, letting the sauce melt across my tongue. For a man with a day full of corpses, confessions, and Kramer's temper, this was medicine. Kramer jabbed his fork into his fish, grunted, and chewed like a man suspicious of subtlety. Not bad, he admitted at last. Better than the slop at the station. Wolfe opened his eyes and regarded him with weary tolerance. Food is not slop, Inspector. It is art. That you compare the two is lamentable. Kramer chewed harder, as if to answer by mastication alone. I sipped my milk and said, I'll take this over a diner any night. Milk, Kramer muttered. Still a boy. Still alive, I countered. Silence settled for a time, filled by the gentle clink of silver, the quiet rhythm of Wolfe's deliberate mastication, and the faint shuffle of Fritz attending courses. When the trout was finished, Fritz returned with roasted potatoes crisped to gold, carrots softened in butter, and a bowl of tender greens dressed with lemon. Wolfe tasted each with solemn approval, while Kramer shovelled in his share with the speed of a man used to meals interrupted by telephones. Finally, Wolfe dabbed his lips with his napkin, leaned back slightly, and spoke with gravity. The sanctity of the door remains inviolate. I raised an eyebrow. Inviolate? Someone bled on the step, in case you forgot. He closed his eyes. The sanctity of the door is not diminished by blood upon the stoop. The threshold was not crossed. The house remains unviolated. Kramer let out a growl. You talk like a priest. A man's dead on your front steps, Wolfe. You think that's nothing? I think, Wolfe said, that the house stood. My household was not breached. That distinction matters to me. Kramer shook his head. You're a stubborn devil. Correct, Wolfe said. Fritz served the next course, a delicate terrine of chicken laced with brandy, followed by salad dressed with walnut oil. He worked with steady rhythm, silent save for the clink of service, but I noticed the faint tremor of relief about him. Fritz had carried unease since admitting he had glimpsed the victim weeks earlier, yet tonight the kitchen was steady again, his order restored. Wolfe, as though reading his chef's mind, said simply, Fritz, the balance is restored. You may rest easy. Fritz inclined his head, a faint smile crossing his lips, then withdrew once more. Kramer, having finished his plate, leaned back with a grunt. So, it's all tied up. Lantry goes to the chair. The secretary walks free but scared. Widow cries in her apartment. And you sit here with trout and beer. Tell me, Wolfe, do you ever lose sleep? No, Wolfe said. I chuckled. He doesn't. I've tried to wake him when the city burned once. He told me to close the window. Kramer snorted. Figures. The clock chimed the half hour. Fritz returned with dessert, pears poached in red wine served with cream. Wolfe tasted, sighed contentedly, and lifted his glass of beer. The chilled glass caught the lamplight, beads of condensation sliding down. Contentment, Wolfe said, is the goal. I have it now. Kramer grumbled. You always get the last word. Not always, Wolfe murmured. Only when necessary. I leaned back, milk glass empty, watching Wolfe raise his beer as if it were a chalice. The Brownstone had borne witness to death, but not invasion. The step had been bloodied, but the walls stood, the rhythm preserved. Dinner resumed, and with it the quiet assertion that within these walls order endured. Kramer rose, hat in hand, coat fetched by me. At the door he paused, looked back at Wolfe and said gruffly, You did well. Damn you. Then he left, swallowed by fog and night. I shut the door, turned back, and saw Wolfe lift his glass again. He drank deeply, eyes closing, satisfied. The Brownstone in violet breathed in peace once more.